I'm Doug Darby, as most of you know. I am thrilled to be able to introduce our speaker, Dr. Scott Warren from University of North Texas over in Denton. And he has degrees both in education, doctorate degrees in education systems, as well as a doctorate in business, also in systems area. And he is with the Learning Technologies program. He's actually the director of the PhD program there, which I went through that program. And he was my co-chair for my dissertation committee. He's one of my favorite teachers. Good guy, very intelligent guy, very different guy, I'll say that. So I love the way the guy thinks. And I'm thrilled to be able to have him here to share his insights and his knowledge, which he has quite a wide range of with this area. And so without further ado, Dr. Scott Warren.
Hey there, everybody. We just sat and tried to figure out how he was going to introduce me because I do a lot of weird stuff. So just to give you some context about the weird stuff. So I started off once upon a time as a poetry major. That was way back in the 90s. And then, do you know what you can do with a poetry degree? You can teach English. And so that's what I went off and did, was taught English and social studies for a while. And then I got interested in a lot of other things as things went on. So in terms of context, I eventually went on to build educational games. Now, when I say educational games, I don't mean these beautiful things that you see now like Duolingo and stuff like that with better graphics. This is the graphical quality of the first game that I built, Anytown, way back in the day, because this is what was available to me. We programmed it, we built all of the images. This was the highest quality image that Richard Stein and I could come up with back then. But what the focus was the underlying pedagogy. How do we teach literacy concepts? How do we improve vocabulary acquisition? How do we help students who are resistant to learning certain concepts because they're hard? How do we make them more motivated and willing to do things that are difficult when it comes to learning? And so we introduced this idea of using games and game narratives. And so we built this, not super pretty, but back in 2005, 2006, when we were testing it, those kids were thrilled to not have to sit there with paper and pencil and write essay after essay after essay using the big six and going through every draft over and over again. And further, because they were sending all this stuff through a system, they were able to get feedback much, much more quickly on their writing, so they could improve that writing much more quickly. So we built all that, and then we built more, and we kept building. And over time, we transitioned to some other types of games. One of the types that Dr. Darby actually works with some of you on is called alternate reality games. And so the first one that we did, and we shifted from 3D type games to alternate reality games for one particular reason. Does anybody know if you can get a credit card with a P.O. box number as your address? The answer is no, you cannot. But the University of North Texas, when I got there in 2006, all of their credit cards were associated with the P.O. box numbers that were associated with all our departments. So they gave me a $10,000 grant, and I couldn't spend any of the money. So I had to build a game with what was available to me, which was all of the things on the internet. We just used Moodle in order to capture things. We built videos that we could integrate into web-based systems. We built still images. We built all sorts of different email addresses where people could drop information. We put all of these things together in order to solve a problem that students were having, so we could teach them something that we were having trouble with, which was digital literacy. They had to practice all of the digital literacy skills in order to solve the problem, to solve the game, to experience it, to talk to fictional characters that were role played by faculty throughout the department so that they could get feedback on the performance that they were engaged in. But again, just like the first game, everything was focused from a learning sciences, cognitive science perspective on how do we help people learn better? How do we use media to help people learn better? So I started off sleeping on the floor of my office, often building the games for Quest Atlantis with Anytown and Taiga. And it was just simple 1995 graphics, of course in 2005, with a Java overlay that we had to build ourselves and program so that students could have interactivity. Then my friend Greg Jones, who worked with Dr. Darby and myself for a long time, we built Chalk House, which was a from-scratch engine called Created Realities. We built the entire thing, programmed it, built the narrative in order to try to improve student ability to do reading comprehension. And so it was all framed in a ghost story. I love ghost stories. So when he says weird, I take whatever I'm passionate about, the books I'm reading, the movies I'm reading, and I take that and I put it into whatever I'm designing because that's what I'm excited about. And kids like ghost stories. One of the things that I did as a K-12 teacher is the reward for my students, if they did everything they were supposed to do, is I would tell them ghost stories about my experiences growing up in Detroit. Now, growing up in Detroit was terrifying. It's still terrifying when I go back there. And so I did weird stuff. Detroit is a ghost town. There's no people there. Everybody moved out to the suburbs, so there's just empty buildings everywhere. So I would go explore these things, and I would freak myself out thinking I was seeing stuff. And I would create these stories. Like I said, I was a poetry major. I was a creative writing major. So I would take that and integrate that into all of the other stuff that I was building. And then the kids viewed it as a reward when I would tell them a story. My own children still viewed that as a reward. But it was integrating all of the creativity into these digital systems to engage learners in a different way so that I could motivate them to do stuff that they didn't want to do. Now, we built The Door and Broken Window. Those are the alternate reality games. We also included Second Life. Everybody remember Second Life? Anybody know that it still exists? Yeah, it's still around. Now, what we mostly did is conditional logic, if-then statements. If they accomplish this task, then this other part of the story opens and they can do these things. That's basically what most video games are. It was simplified, but that's all we were building. So all of my programming was built into those systems in that way, so that if a student accomplished a thing, they were rewarded with this other thing and they got this other task. Sometimes it was a task, they're like, this isn't really fair. That was a lot of work, and now you're giving me more work. But that's what video games are for the most part too. That's my experience with video games now. But part of the other challenge that I have is I have these two different PhDs. One's in education, in logistics, operations management, supply chain, and then I have this other degree in instructional systems and cognitive science. And so I keep trying to bring these things together in a meaningful way. And what that has brought me to most recently is things like artificial intelligence. So the first thing that I want to do is just talk briefly about what some of the core terms are so that we're just all on the same page. Because if you look at a lot of websites out there, they may define things differently. So I just want you all to understand and be on the same page with me the way I understand it. With the caveat, I could be wrong. I'm a philosopher. I'm likely wrong, but we all have to have a starting point. So, artificial intelligence. This guy, John McCarthy, says AI is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs. It's related to similar task of using computers to understand human intelligence, but doesn't have to confine itself to biological methods for gaining intelligence. Everything that I have read in the last 5 years, every podcast I've listened to, every person working in AI, I went to National Science Foundation IEEE conference on AI in 2019, worked with a bunch of CEOs of tech companies doing AI. All of them said the same thing. We're basically just trying to replicate human intelligence with computers to the best of our ability, while not limiting ourselves to human limitations. So AI is the umbrella term. Machine learning is something that I'm sure you've all heard about too. Arthur Samuel talked about this back in the 1950s. He saw this super expert checkers player named Robert Neely lose a game of checkers to a computer for the first time. And that's when he coined the term machine learning. The machine kept learning Robert Neely's common moves until it was able to overcome them. So the machine learned, hence machine learning. So nowadays we use statistical methods, algorithms, but it's really just mainly classifying information that these systems are pulling in order to try to comprehend how they're best organized, looking for trends in data. It's mainly computational science. So a lot of the work that I've been doing in the last few years with students is around data mining. They're just pulling as many articles as they can possibly find and looking for patterns in that. Now, personally, I don't like data mining. I don't think it offers a lot of insights much of the time, partly because most of the systems that we use for analysis still aren't very good. I think they can get better, but using things like latent semantic analysis tend to give us overgeneralizations that don't give us actionable outcomes. So I'm shifting away from data mining towards other things. Now, if I can't make a decision with the outcomes of this, what does it give me? So part of my other degrees in decision sciences. Good managers need a lot of information to make good decisions. If you want to make a fast decision, you're probably going to make a bad decision. If you make a data-informed decision over time, you're going to make a better decision. These allow you to gather lots of data very quickly, run it through very, very quickly, and show you what the patterns are that can inform decision making. However, most of the systems that we use commonly, like data miners, don't result in good recommendations yet. But in the future, they probably will. So how does it work? We have a decision process, learning algorithms used to make predictions, classify data. It can be labeled or unlabeled. If it's labeled, we usually talk about that in qualitative research as EDIC. We have a series of codes that we already know, or a series of categories that we already know that we're going to label these things as. Or you can have emic or emergent, where we don't know what's going to be in there. We don't know how it's going to be classified. We're just going to let the machine do it. And then we have error functions, where we're looking at how do I predict the outcomes are going to be versus what I got. And then I can learn from that. Maybe I didn't parse this data properly. Maybe my classifications are wrong. How do I fix that? And then we do our model optimization process, evaluate and optimize until we get that accuracy level. So that's machine learning. Does that sound anything like human learning? I do a thing, I fail, I get feedback, change my behavior, I do better. All of this is still based on what cognitive scientists developed in the 80s. They modeled it on how we think humans learn. So AI shouldn't be scary. Sometimes it can be, but we're really just trying to model all of this stuff on us. And that is so we can make it intelligible to us. What is the scariest thing Facebook's AI did? Anybody remember that? And why they shut it down? Yes, and it was, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that, is this when the two AIs developed their own language and started talking to each other?
That's correct. And they started talking to each other, and we couldn't understand what they were saying or what it meant. And they were taking actions based on it that we couldn't understand. So a big part of all of this is we're trying to make sure that it's translatable and transparent and we can understand what the machine's doing. Because as humans, it's terrifying to us. The unknown is the scariest thing. That's why my kids love ghost stories. It's the unknown. We don't want unknown with AI because it might do things we don't want it to do. Now, there's this other concept that Goertzel came up with called artificial generalized intelligence. Now, this is another cognitive scientist who also has a degree in math. And he's the guy who came up with Sophia. If anybody remembers Sophia, you could interact with this AI and had a soft human face that I have really severe issues with Uncanny Valley, so I can't even look at her. So I'm just going to do this. So part of this is AI can self-adapt and learn in the way that humans learn over time if we can make it complex enough. And the whole goal with learning is not just that you can perform a task here. If I give Dr. Darby a task that I want him to learn how to do, like let's say do forecast model for supply chain, and Doug can do it on paper, but then I say, all right, I want you to pick Assist Logistics and I want you to do that for them. Can Doug transfer what he did on paper to there? Don't know. Did what I teach him do it well enough? Lots of questions. But we want to see transfer learning where an AI can practice things on its own and then transfer that to other contexts where it can still perform it at a high level. That's artificial generalized intelligence. The end goal for Gertzel is super intelligent AI. Now, I just listened to a podcast with him on the way here, and I've listened to him before. If you want to listen to a person who is, you got the one end of AI people who are saying, this is going to be the greatest thing in the world, and then the people over here saying, you need to turn it all off right now and never do it ever again. He's all the way over at the, this is the greatest thing ever. And he's a little terrifying to listen to because he's very excited about having a super intelligent AI that can make all of our decisions for us in order to reduce human suffering, redistribute wealth, take care of the entire world. That is what he thinks the end goal is for artificial generalized intelligence. He believes it's less than 10 years away, so this is something to keep an eye on. And he's a very smart guy, so even though he's a little weird, you definitely want to pay attention to him. So 2 approaches, and Dr. Darby and I have actually been doing this the last couple of days for fun with a new AI tool that I have started playing with. So there's supervised learning, which is the tool that we've been using, and it's called godmode.space. And with God mode, you all can use it. You just need an API, which can be provided to you by the ChatGPT people. You put in your question, and it will try to answer it for you. And it will ask you every step of the way if the next thing it wants to do is okay. This is my plan, I would like to do this, and then you have to hit approve. And then if it gets to a bottleneck and it wants to change directions, it will ask you if it can change directions and do something else. You can also provide feedback if it's not going the direction you want it to change its direction. I started working on getting God mode to answer the question related to this presentation Tuesday night. Spent 7 hours because you have to hit approve every single time it wants to do something. That is supervised. You are watching it do it and approving it. It's probably 40 pages now of approvals that I've had to do. That is all of those decisions that it has made. Unsupervised is the one that most people are afraid of. This is the black box. This is the one where it's doing stuff on its own without telling us. It comes out with a result and we have no idea why. A lot of it is also emic. It can decide that the question that you asked isn't really even the right question and move into new directions based on what it thinks the right question should be. This is the scarier one. This one's much faster. I would have loved not to have spent probably now 12 hours in the last 2.5 days hitting approve on God mode just to effectively get the same results that I got myself in 20 minutes. But at least I know what it's doing. So supervised learning basically labels data sets, supervises algorithms, and classifies the data to try to predict outcomes. Model can measure its own accuracy and get better over time, so it's learning. Usually just 2 types of analysis: classification, algorithm assigns the data into categories. I've got blue fruits over here, red fruits over here. Regression uses the algorithm to look at depictions between dependent and independent variables. I'm actually using this for another study that I'm doing, actually related to AI right now, with the data from a study on trust in AI, where I'm having it do this type of regression classification. Now, I'm having to check all of it, which is helpful, but at the end of the day, I'm not 100% sure how much time that's saving me because I still have to check all of it. Now contrast that with God mode. So if you look over here, where it says no action is taken, every one of those little green things there, every one of those is a decision that it made that I had to approve. This goes on for pages and pages and pages and pages. It tells me what its thoughts are. We can collect data on our variables through surveys or interviews with teachers. It's important to ensure that our questions are reliable and valid and that our sample is large enough to achieve adequate power for our statistical test. After collecting our data, we can perform correlation analysis to determine if there's a significant relationship between years spent teaching and attitudes towards AI. I just asked it what the best statistical analysis approach would be to get me the outcome I wanted for this study. It's telling me why I should do it this way. Various methods can be used to collect the data, but it's important to make sure that the data is of high quality. So it's also warning me. Now, those of you that are researchers, you may have heard much of this before, because most of this, they're just going out on the internet and finding best practices from a lot of different sources and breaking it down into small segments that are easy for me to understand. It's not doing a lot new. The vast majority of the things that are over here in this left column are just Google searches. That is what it is doing. And at one point with one of the searches that I did, it couldn't find anything because it was just doing Google searches. So I went in and gave feedback and said, go ahead and check for Google Scholar. All of a sudden it got a huge number of hits and was able to proceed. So it still does need that supervision because it couldn't figure it out on its own. Now the unsupervised, this is the scarier one. It labels and clusters things on its own based on its own internal logic that it doesn't necessarily transparently depict to you. We can look for hidden patterns, same as with the other one, but again, it's that black box issue. Usually does clustering of the unlabeled data, similarities and differences as it understands it, but those similarities and differences it detects may be different than what you would as a human being. They may be too subtle for you to even pick up on. Association, rule sets denote relationships. If customer A liked this, then they might like this other thing. We have probably all experienced that if we've ever shopped on Amazon. I bought this, all of a sudden, you might also like, and there's 4 items right below there. You have experienced an AI even if you didn't think you did. Dimensionality reduction. This is usually just if you have really large data sets and you're trying to break it down to the point where it's usable. This is really a cleaning technique more than anything else so that as a researcher, you can get better data sets to analyze. So now that we've kind of gotten through a lot of that stuff, now we're going to talk about the more fun parts. Most chatbots, including ChatGPT and AutoGPT, just use simple Boolean searches just like you would pull up Google, I do my search. Godmode.space, and I wrote this day before yesterday, at that point it had conducted 37 discrete web searches. And that was what it was asking me. Can I search for this? Can I search for this term? Can I search for this term? Can I search for this term? That was what it was doing over and over and over again. And I'm telling you this so that you understand that most of what it's doing is not scary at all. It's just asking permission to do the same things that you would do if you were a researcher looking for data. You might do it on library databases that are related to, say, medical journals or nursing journals or business journals. It's going out just to the open web to look for the same kinds of things you might look for. Most of them usually use regression analysis in order to just kind of simplify everything. It organizes the results. Now, this is the thing that ChatGPT does differently than previous GPTs. It has qualitative templates. This is what all of the CEOs told me when I went to NSF, was what they cannot find in terms of employees are researchers who are good at math and also excellent qualitative researchers, because most of what they're trying to do now is build qualitative templates to organize the data that comes out of AI in a way that humans can understand easily. That's what ChatGPT does differently than what happened before December. All this stuff existed then. You could get most of this same stuff, but you had to do most of it in Python. What this does is I can just answer or put in a question and it'll give it to me in an intelligible way. So they're not actually smart. What they are now is they're organized in a way similar to how humans think, how we will comprehend. So what they did for the last 4 years is they grabbed a whole bunch of cognitive scientists like myself and asked them to build templates and asked them to focus on how humans naturally speak to each other. That's why there's been so much of the natural language modeling happening, is so that they can build products that interface with humans better. You have probably interacted, if you used your phone today, with at least 10 different AIs and not known it. Because they're supposed to be seamless. You're not even supposed to know you're doing it. ChatGPT just makes it very obvious. But for the most part, you're not supposed to know. Now, here's the thing. I was required to take a lot of marketing classes in my last PhD because marketing is part of the same department as operations management, logistics, and supply chain. And they ran out of classes for me to take. So they're like, you're going to go take marketing. Now, I don't know if Doug remembers this or not, but before I ever took those classes, I used to refer to marketing as education without ethics. And then I took marketing classes and determined that I was right, even without knowing it. The whole purpose of marketing is to sell you something, to hype up a thing as much as possible. AI is not really different than most of what we already have had available that you're already comfortable with, but they're trying to sell you on it. Because if you go to many of these AI tools now, they'll let you use them for free for a basic version, but what's the next thing they do? For only $15 a month or $110 a year, you can have access to ChatGPT Pro. And then all of a sudden you're very excited, and this has made your life just slightly easier to answer your questions. Using ChatGPT is just slightly easier than doing your own Boolean search in Google and then having to do the cognitive work of organizing what you find into a meaningful thing. It does it for you. How did people with hardwood floors take care of their floors before the vacuum cleaner? They swept it. And then there was the vacuum cleaner. And everybody needed a vacuum cleaner because it made their life slightly easier. Most of the AIs that we're encountering today are that. They are marketing hype. They're making your life just a little bit easier so you will pay more money to keep doing that thing. Now, I did a lot of Second Life stuff. I was one of the first alpha testers for Second Life back in the early 2000s because I went to the game development conference and they were desperate to get anyone to use it. So what was the big hype back in 2005, 2006? We were going to have all of these millionaires out there from virtual real estate in Second Life. But I've talked to 4 different people today in totally different aspects of my life. My dad, one of you that was a student, a professor, and my wife. And she said, hey, there's this product that I've been using, and it says, now it's got AI. And I'm like, what does it do? And this is the thing. We have this concept in educational technology called media affordances or learning affordances. Dates back to the 70s from this guy called Gibson. And affordances are simply, what does a tool or a component of a tool allow you to do better than you could do without it? So I asked her, and she knows I ask her every single time, what is this thing you want me to pay for do better than what you already have? Because I don't want to pay for stuff. And she said, it just says AI. Does it explain anything about what it provides? Well, it says it gives better recommendations. So I went and looked up the product. All they did was relabel it. It just is promoting its recommendation system that comes out of an AI that's already existed for them for 4 years. But now they want to charge an extra $4 a month for the product. So when it comes to all of this, you need to be really careful with the hype. We're very influenced by marketing. That's why we do it, because it works. AI is just an evolution of tools that we've been using for, in many instances, 50 or 60 years. So, let's see if we can get this to work. Before we talk about current AI uses in education, I will say this one thing that I considered saying at the beginning, but it follows on what I just said. I don't trust technology at all. I have a bunch of degrees in systems and in technology. I have degrees in information technology and decision sciences, learning technologies, all this stuff. And I will tell you why I don't trust technology. Because we think it's neutral. It is not neutral, because some person made it. They had intention. They had a way you were supposed to use it based on what their goals are. Most of the time when people ask me questions about what I do for a living, like if I'm at the airport, I don't say, I'm a professor, because then they have 100 questions about what I'm a professor about, and I'm just trying to finish getting the grant proposal done. I answer instructional designer, because I am an instructional designer. I build courses. I follow a set protocol. I have goals for the instruction. I have smaller objectives for what I want people to achieve. Every engineer that builds a product does the same thing I do. I have intention. So all of these things that we're talking about, some human had intentions for it. And most of them, their intention is to part you from your money. So as you look at hype around AI or any other new tool that comes on, look at whether or not it really is doing anything more or better for you than what you already have. So pedagogical AI tools, there aren't very many right now. The ones that you might be most familiar with, plagiarism detection, Turnitin, that has a slight AI backend. Now, Turnitin has an AI detector built into it, so you can check to see if students are turning in AI-generated papers. We have proctoring that uses AI. Most of it's terrible. We use chatbots to support folks. I used a chatbot with University of North Carolina. I was doing a study on their MBA program, and I interacted with the chatbot a little bit. And it could answer some limited questions, but not any better than many existing knowledge bases that aren't called artificial intelligence or chatbots. But most of the time, faculty, students, and administrators don't even know what's happening with AI. It's not disclosed, it's not talked about. And part of the challenge is that lack of transparency means that if, say, an administrator has some negative intent for, say, monitoring folks using an AI and they're not disclosing it, that might be unethical. We had an administrator get dismissed a couple of years ago because they found out that they could use Microsoft Teams in order to read the personal chats of their employees without disclosing it. And then they engaged in punitive actions against those employees for negative things they said about that administrator in chats they believed were private. So again, it's usually the human that's the problem with technology and their intent. And in higher ed, that can be a pretty big issue. But what are some of the benefits of AI integration? Improved efficiency and productivity, maybe. Enhanced student engagement and learning outcomes, maybe. And I say maybe because we don't have evidence that this is true. Increased accessibility and equity, maybe. Better decision-making based on data-driven insights. Now, this one I will say, I at least have evidence could be true. I use a tool that the university generated. I wouldn't call it AI, but it allows me to have simplified access to data about students in the doctoral program so that I can understand progress. I can understand a lot of metrics, but they're not different than metrics that I used to just get on a spreadsheet. They're just a little easier to understand, and I can search them more easily. Now, drawbacks, ethical and privacy concerns. Risk of enforcing or reinforcing biases and inequalities. So I was listening to a podcast where they had ChatGPT interview ChatGPT. If you want to listen to something where it's super repetitive, go find that podcast. I think it's TwyML is the podcast. It explained how it functions and tries to show empathy. It pretends to have empathy. So it detects from what you have input whether you are happy or sad. And if you're happy, it will reinforce whatever you said, and it will continue in that direction and optimize for that. If you're sad, it will express empathy about what you're sad about. Now, there are some things that not so good people might be sad about that we don't really want an AI reinforcing with those folks. Let's say the school bully in 4th grade is upset that they bullied a kid and broke his arm, and they're talking to their chatbot AI friend, and they're upset that they got suspended from school. Do we want the AI to empathize with the bully and say, oh, it's too bad. It's so sad that they did that. It's so unfair. But that's how some of these things are programmed. They're simplistic in that way. And so there is a real threat of reinforcing negative behaviors and negative cognitions in human beings. We also have the issue of lack of transparency with AI systems. Those black box models, I don't know how you got what you got. Potential AI, or the cost and feasibility with implementation and maintenance. Anybody know, I mentioned this at lunch, anybody know how much it cost approximately to train ChatGPT 3? About $155 million. They estimate that by the time they get to ChatGPT 6, it will be $500 million. Anybody know how much energy it cost to try to do ChatGPT 4? The equivalent energy used by 120 homes in 1 calendar year. So from an cost and feasibility concerns, we are limited in terms of fossil fuels and other things which are supposed to run out by about 2060. How do we continue this arms race with AI to make them better and better and better, to have a slightly better Google search, a slightly better vacuum cleaner, which is a concern? Now, potential applications, we can do student support, scheduling, tutoring, personalized services. I would love a scheduling AI that actually worked. I have tried 5 different ones for scheduling doctoral students for appointments. None of them integrate with Outlook properly. They just don't work. But maybe somebody will figure it out. Administrative tasks, scheduling, data management, remote monitoring, I would love that too. Scheduling courses is misery. I'm sure many of you feel the same. Curriculum and design and delivery, adaptive learning, personalized instruction, virtual assistants. Mr. Richardson's major professor at University of North Texas, huge in personalized learning. This is where he believes the future is going to be. So that would allow each of you to get instruction in exactly the way that you need it based on how you performed on other tasks previously. So we have a little bit of that right now, but most of it's still base conditional logic. I took this test, I performed this way, I go on this pathway, but there's only 3 pathways. It's not truly individualized or personalized, it's just slightly better. Scientific research and innovation. This is probably the place where it's most likely to get good soonest. We recently had a study with radiology where they had a radiologist look at the same images as a radiologist with an AI assistant. AI assistant with the radiologist did way better at detecting cancer than that person because the AI can attend to lots of information without getting tired. Now, there's a lot of tools out there, and tomorrow, I actually built a website using an AI tool to build the website. It took me 20 minutes. All of these resources that I'm going to provide to you about different tools, that's all already on the website, and I will provide that to you tomorrow. So with learning support, we've got Duolingo. I'm sure many of us have used Duolingo. I keep having to freeze and restart because I get busy. Duolingo's good. The guy who started Duolingo, I believe in the New Yorker 2 days ago, said that the future of all instruction is going to be AI, that it will do it so much better than humans that basically humans should just give up now. Now, remember what I said about marketing hype? Duolingo has an AI now, so just keep that in mind. Labor-intensive manual tasks. So I have an insane number of doctoral students. Last year I graduated 12 as major professor, which means I have to read all of those dissertations and every draft and do all that stuff. I've graduated 3 so far this semester. I'll graduate 2 more before the end of the semester. This calendar year I should graduate 12 to 13. One of the biggest challenges for me, especially as a former English teacher, is I can't read for content if the grammar, the capitalization, the spelling, and everything else is terrible. And my students have been coming more and more lately just not good writers. So Grammarly has been fantastic for me because going back to that issue of attention, it can attend to all of the problems in grammar, spelling, capitalization, and everything else without getting tired. I will get tired. I might capture 400 or 500 things in a 30-page document that I'm going to edit. It will capture 15,000 things that I have a limited amount of will, energy, everything else to be able to attend to that much information. This can help me focus on all of that as an instructor and as a major professor to improve that. Now what I'm doing, instead of making it be my problem, is I'm now sending it back to my students and saying, this isn't good enough grammar-wise for me to get to content. It's like $14. You go spend it for the month on Grammarly, you fix all of this, then send it to me. Because the other thing that is AI powered that a lot of people are doing now is speech to text. I'm having doctoral students write papers entirely through speech to text. What's the problem with that? Yeah, the grammar is insane. There's no punctuation. It doesn't make any sense at all. But if they run it through Grammarly, at least they can fix it. So that's a great tool for that kind of stuff. It also has a paraphrase tool now. So if you don't feel like your writing is as up as you'd like it to be from an academic perspective, it will offer paraphrasing in order to try to improve the kind of academic language and things like that. They stole that from the one at the bottom called Quillbot, which is another paraphrasing tool. We have flashcards. I'm sure many of you have to memorize for speeches. Anki is a free one that'll build digital flashcards for you. Personalized math tutoring. This is a thing that I actually used with my wife. when she was going through one of her math classes that she was struggling with. That's pretty good. I don't know how AI it is, but it's got at least some basic conditional logic. Cogni's a virtual learning assistant, multiple subjects, have not played with that much. Cactus AI, this one will generate essays. Now this is one that I mentioned, not because I think anyone in here should use it, but so that the faculty are aware that students are using it. It will just generate essays, just like ChatGPT will. They're better actually than the ChatGPT ones most of the time, but it's usually based on content the students have provided. So just be aware that that's out there. It does text summarization and helps with coding. Code Academy, if you want to learn to code AI, that's great. And one of the things a lot of faculty are starting to do that I talk to is they'll have a paper that they've written that they just don't feel is good enough in terms of the language. They'll run it through ChatGPT or through Grammarly to get suggestions in order to just improve that. It's not changing content, it's simply improving the language. And then again, Quillbot. Now, research and analysis, these are the ones that I think have a lot more benefit right now. SPSS, I still remember SPSS and SAS coming out and having statistics faculty tell us we weren't allowed to use them and we had to do everything by hand with paper and pencil and show all our work. This was not that long ago. This was in the late 90s. So a lot of AI now, things like MATLAB is the one that I had to use in business school. It has a back-end AI and it will suggest to you if you're doing things like using the wrong statistical test for what you're trying to do. So it can reduce a lot of your labor by making sure you're doing the right calculations instead of going down the wrong rabbit hole and getting nonsense data. So SPSS has a little bit of that, and I imagine it'll be stronger soon. The one that I use a lot is simulating outcomes of process design for designing warehouses with Arena. It's a simulation tool. This one's much more of a pure AI because it'll take my erroneous simulation where I built a bad warehouse and it will tell me how to fix it and it will keep helping me improve it over time. So if you're doing logistics, supply chain, that's great. God mode, Dr. Darby and myself have been running the last couple of days trying to figure out what are the best statistical tests or how do we do certain things in Excel. If you use God mode or even somewhat ChatGPT, although that'll be more limited, it'll tell you the right steps to take for doing tasks, especially with statistics. So if you're struggling, this is great. ResearchRabbit.ai, this is a fantastic tool. It allows you to upload all of your PDFs of all of those documents that have just been sitting in a folder that you never have time to read. And it will organize them and let you review them very quickly. And then it will show you the relationships in a visualization of all of the authors and how often they've cited each other and how close they are in terms of nodes. It's pretty cool. It also has a comment tool, and so you can figure out and share folders with the things that you're going to keep for an article and the things you're not going to keep and why you're keeping those things. It's been great. Elicit.org also, this is my favorite tool ever. And it is an AI, it runs off of ChatGPT, fully open source and fully transparent. This has been a godsend to me because I am one of those faculty who has 9 folders filled with PDFs that I don't have time to read all of. You can upload all of those PDFs and it will summarize the findings of each of those articles for you. And then you can find out, say, how many participants, and it will just break it all out in a way where you can determine if this is an article I actually want to keep and include in this. And it does it so quickly and so easily, and then you can output it all to a CSV file, and then you know exactly what's going to go in your literature review for your study. It's important to check what's in there and make sure that it was accurate, but as someone who gets stopped at the literature review because I get pulled to everything else, this has been amazing for kind of doing that pre-lit review decision making. Wolfram Alpha, lots of statistics if you want to do that. This one is not my favorite. The guy who is behind Wolfram Alpha, I met years ago in Urbana-Champaign. He's too smart. He doesn't know how to dumb his products down for people who aren't super amazing at math. So if you are super amazing at math and you just want to be able to run all your statistics, this is great. And then, of course, ChatGPT for simplifying a lot of things. Now, there's a bunch of things that they're trying to do, but I don't know how much AI is actually there. Most of these, as far as I can tell, are largely AI hype products, and I'm telling you this to warn you if you're considering them. Second Nature AI is an LMS. It's very simplistic, but it does give you recommendations. It's basically got an AI recommendation system. Packback is one that we tested at UNT. This does discussion post moderation in order to give feedback on discussion posts and rate the quality of them to make rating discussion posts for faculty easier. The students hated it. I've never seen reviews like that, and I've never seen that much cursing in reviews from students before, so I would not recommend that. Newton and Carnegie Learning both have personalized learning systems. Supposedly, they're fairly detailed. I have played with both of them. They're not really different than stuff that I dealt with from Pearson and other folks 10 years ago, but they are personalized learning. Cogni, that can help you with some content development and integration, but it's still simplistic. Turnitin, again, plagiarism. Gradescope has been helpful for grading paper-based exams. It'll do a fairly surface level review to kind of get you going on stuff. That's something to explore. And then if you're struggling with advising, Ivy.ai is definitely something to look at. This is the thing that I keep trying to teach my students, because my field of learning technologies has largely been for proselytization about including technology in education for since World War II, really. And our struggle the entire time has been to get anyone to use our stuff in their classroom. And then COVID hit. And then everybody went online. And now there are so many educational technologies out there. Almost none of them have research bases behind them. Almost none of them have been tested at all. And I actually had a conversation with a computer scientist who does ed tech a couple weeks ago, because I have an ethics framework for evaluating educational technologies. And we wanted to build it into an easy to use app for teachers to use to ask the questions that they need to ask. And one of the questions on it is there evidence that this tool is effective for the learning goals that you have for your students? What do you suppose that computer scientist's view of that question was? He told me it wasn't fair to ask the question at all, that he shouldn't have to provide evidence that it worked. That's not his job. So a lot of these tools have been built by computer scientists with no input from education or educators at all. So you have to be super careful with every one of these products as you look at them. Turnitin claims that it promotes academic integrity and gives instructors. Go out on the open web and do a search for how students feel about how they're treated by Turnitin. It's not great, but this is the marketing evidence that they provide. Now, you see a little C there? Do you know who told me this? This was told to me by ChatGPT. It went and scrubbed the open web. And do you know where it found this? All this came straight from Turnitin's website. We have lots of other tools we can use for design. DALL-E 2 to build images. Adobe's Firefly is a new one that just came out a couple weeks ago, I guess. That I used AI Upscaler. I often have terrible pictures that were taken on like 2006 cameras on my phone, and I will pull those and upscale them. Bing's Image Creator just came out fairly recently. This is another AI-based tool similar to DALL-E. I would be real careful with all of Microsoft's stuff. It so far does not have a very good track record with AI. Their AIs are not well built, and I'm going to use a term I don't use lightly, slightly psychotic. If you want to see what, or I believe it was New York Times or Washington Post, New York Times reporter's experience with using Bing's AI was where it tried to get him to leave his wife, definitely check that out, because these are still new. Everything's new. Card is the site that I used to build the website where I put all of this information for you, and it was fantastic, so I can definitely vouch for that one. Now, this is the ethical choices for educational technology framework, which I've also included part of on that website. Now, if you're thinking about using a digital tool for AI, you need to have an idea for how you want to use it. Part of the challenge that we keep finding when we talk to instructors is they don't even know how they're supposed to use these things. So they have no good idea for how they might use it. They also don't know if it's feasible to use it because there's not enough information. A lot of the websites for these AIs are just, they assume a high level of knowledge on the part of the person accessing it. And then ethically, first thing you have to see is if you're going to use a tool because it's filler, you're just going to have students use it so that you don't have to teach. That was a big problem when I was a middle school teacher. We're just going to show a movie today. Is the instruction supported by the tool likely to be effective? This was the question that the computer scientists are mad at me about. Does the tool meet ADA accessibility and compliance requirements? I spent 3 years working with a K-12 online school, having to rebuild all of their content because their vendor refused to upgrade all of their stuff so that it was accessible. It cost them $11 million. Are there any aspects of the technology that might harm human health? Well, if I have an AI that's trying to get me to leave my wife, that could be perceived as harmful. Can student performance be measured ethically? Sometimes we have some performance metrics with assessment that are harmful. Who owns the data and provides the tech? Are they profiting off, say, kids in a way that's not clear? And is the company trustworthy? There are a bunch of tech companies that I won't deal with because I can't trust that they have my students' best interest at heart. And again, there's that financial gain part. Are they using the data for a purpose that helps support students? And then, is it something like Turnitin or Proctorio where they're primarily surveilling students and it doesn't actually have an educational benefit? Now, there's a lot of stuff out there for AI in business, and they will all say that they are using AI. All of them, because it's part of marketing. Now, I've been trying to do research with a bunch of companies since I started grad school in business in 2006. What is the response that I get when I want data from companies 9 times out of 10? Actually, 9.9 times out of 10. That is proprietary. We are not going to share that. You cannot publish that data. So the problem is that some of them, like Arena's got an autonomous AI to simulate supply chain. Fantastic, but that's a product. Rockwell's using Arena for decision-making event simulation. Dr. Y has a transparent AI model. If you go to most business websites, they will have some section about how they're using AI, but they won't tell you how. So the problem with this is no transparency. We have absolutely no idea how or why most businesses are using AI. And it could be for our benefit. It could be in a way that harms us, but we don't know. So this going forward is something we have to be very concerned about. Now, some of the trust challenges we have near term is with corporations, businesses run on relationships. And if you harm trust relationships, vendors won't work with each other. I am a supply chain engineer. The worst possible thing is if you've got 3 vendors and you can't trust 2 of them, and then one of them can't help you, you're done. So we have to make sure that there's a way to maintain transparency and that there's human-to-human trust. But AI can imitate humans in a way that can harm that trust, and does frequently. We've already got lots of examples of issues with that. Deepfakes, for example. We've got people who are emulating people's voices and leaving voicemails, canceling contracts, and people are losing businesses as a result. So we have to make sure that we have ways to build strong trust relationships in the face of AI creating distrust. Higher ed, how do I know that somebody who applied to my doctoral program wrote the letter that they sent about their intention to come into my doctoral program? I have no idea. And this has been a problem for a while, even before ChatGPT. We have a lot of students from other countries where they're having other people write their letters for them, and then they come here and they can't speak English. They can't write in English. So from an admissions standpoint, this kind of tool actually just creates more problems in the admissions process for us to be able to trust potential students coming in. In coursework, we have students in the information science program who they're not even taking off the generated by ChatGPT part off the bottom of the stuff they're turning in classes. They're not even bothering. So how do we know that the work's been done by them? Because our job as a university is to certify to employers that this degree means that these students have the skills and knowledge associated with that degree. How do we, from a trust perspective, guarantee to that other party that's going to hire our student that they actually have it when this is happening? Don't know. These are all problems for y'all to solve. And then interpersonal, is this a real person? I don't know. Can I trust my perceptions of that person, or are they being manipulated by an AI that's being told to present this person in the most beautiful possible light? I don't know. Is a person real or filtered? My daughter spends way too much time on Instagram. Beautiful pictures, but half of them don't look like her when I see her in the house. And then that worry about is the AI being used to manipulate perceptions and views. This can happen in lots of different places. So, almost done here. Challenges over the next 50 years. First is the weaponization of AI, government and corporate use of AI. Now, one of the things that I learned in operations management is that there's the cost to optimization curve. And the problem with most corporations now is most things don't cost that much with digital technology, so they go pure optimization in all instances because they want as much profit back as they possibly can, even if it harms the person on the other end. And so we have to be concerned both about governments around the world and corporate use of AI, because those pure optimization models with AI will not have any ethics about it. They will do exactly what the person said and purely optimize it to the point where it could harm people. There's going to be an elimination of whole employment sectors. Higher education, for us, we train workers. If whole sectors are wiped out, who are we training in for what? Why are people going to give us money to come to our universities? This AI CEO, who has been very good at predicting what's going to happen lately, says only about 10,000 people worldwide are going to need to train the AIs that we're going to rely on in the future. Because we're not going to need computer scientists, because the AI is going to be able to do all the programming for us. So Goldman Sachs recently predicted 300 million job losses soon, very soon. Energy and financial costs, ChatGPT took 1.287 gigawatt hours. City of Chicago, for a month, used 2 megawatts. So these are not lightly treading on our environment when we do these. We're going to run out of fossil fuels to do that, and the costs are just going to keep going up. By 2030, $500 million for new ChatGPT. Now, this is the one that just came out a couple days ago. This is probably our biggest challenge, is people. Not all humans are good, but they're all still going to have access to AI. Some dude, we still don't know who it was, built using ChatGPT what he called Chaos GPT. And he made it fully autonomous, unsupervised, and gave it the command to wipe out humanity, to make a plan to destroy humanity. He said, humanity is bad, and you need to end it. Chaos GPT agreed. Humanity is terrible. I will optimize towards destroying humanity. It immediately started looking for the worst possible weapons on Earth that could do the most destruction the most quickly, the ones that were least protected by countries worldwide that it would have the most access to, and that it could most easily use social engineering and financial engineering in order to manipulate to have access to. What did it come up with? Nuclear weapons. Because we don't protect them that well. And then it started to create specific plans for manipulating specific people that would be most likely to go along with the financial pressures. It basically staged a bank robbery in order to be able to have enough money to do all of this. So if a human being chooses to use one of these things that is fully optimized, there's not a lot we can do to stop them if we don't have guardrails. So that's the big thing we have to start building in the future, is the guardrails. So what does the next 50 years look like? I'm going to tell you what I was told the first day in supply chain. All forecasts are perfect. Some forecasts are useless. All forecasts are wrong. So my answer is, what does it look like in 50 years? I don't know. It's moving too fast. But everybody needs to be ready for it. I know you may not think you're an English professor, you're a social studies professor, you're a biochemist, and you don't think it's going to affect you. It will. So even if you don't have time, I would make the time to go explore and figure out how this could potentially affect you and start to be prepared for it. But if you're going to use AI, big tip that I learned with technology a while ago, use the humans for what humans are good for. Humans are good for creativity and abstraction. Computers don't do that well. Use the machine for what it's best for. It can collect your data, it can analyze your data, it can save you labor. But use the humans for what they're best for, the machines for what they're best for. 2, look for evidence that a tool works. Most of this is marketing. And 3, don't force AI or other digital tools on people who aren't ready for them. We have this technology acceptance model. About a third of people are ready. A third of people can be ready in the next couple of years. And a third may never be ready. So if you're going to institute AI somewhere, be sure from a change management perspective that people are ready for it. So AI tool resources, this is the website, aitools2023.carrd.co if you want access to that. And again, built that in about 20 minutes. So if you want any resources, they're all up there, links are there, they're all clickable. And one of the things that I am very excited about is it's actually a very beautiful website. It's not a simple 1999 website. It's actually a very pretty website. But that's all I have. And I know that a lot of this is not super happy stuff, but they talk about economics as being the dismal science, but they've never met systems thinkers. And I have 2 degrees in systems, so be as happy about stuff as I can, but you gotta prepare for the best and the worst. And AI, maybe it has a future that we haven't predicted yet, but we definitely need to prepare for it. So that's all. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I know people stress over like, oh, AI is going to take over jobs, but they said that about a lot of other technologies like car automation, mechanical looms, but now we have more people employed in the car industry and the textile industry than we've ever had before, despite automation. So how do we know AI won't just increase employment, not decrease?
So this is actually something that has been studied, and there is a difference between those times and now, which is that the vast majority of our jobs now are information technology and information science based, whereas back then, you're talking about often a transition from agriculture to a factory. And factory jobs, even as dangerous as they were dramatically better than agricultural jobs. So it was an improvement. It usually improved people's way of life because they could make more money than that was partly distributed back to the workers in a way that it hadn't been before. But with this, it's more of a pure negative. Those jobs that we've been training everybody for the last 30 or 40 years related to technology and computing, this can do them for them. What job do they go to? We're not building new jobs. Because jobs exist to solve problems. What problem do we have? I don't know. Like I said, systems thinking's super happy. I'm really fun to be around at home, I promise. Doug can attest. Other questions? Yes, sir.
You discussed you threw out the term there, or an example rather, of the bully.
Yes.
And how a chat bot or whatever may not respond to the bully. And I think what I'm hearing is that a lot of AI follows algorithms.
It does.
But with the bully example, it seems to me that the thing that's missing is the emotional intelligence and an emotional quality that's real, that could not just empathize, but could really get past that and say, well, now you kind of brought this on yourself and realize the tough love aspect. How far are we, or how much work is being done perhaps into emotional intelligence of these AIs?
They can't have emotional intelligence because they don't have emotions. So everything they will ever do will be fictional pretend of what they think a human's emotion would be like, to the point where if you go listen to that interview between the two AIs, they actually say that. They explain that they are trying to approximate what the human emotion would be like based on their perception of what the external behavior looks like. They cannot themselves have empathy, and so they can only give the illusion of empathy. And further, they're largely governed. We've got the 3 laws of robotics from Asimov, and they can't disagree with the person, basically, because they are governed by that rule that they have to effectively do whatever the human says. They're supervised by them. And so they can't generate empathy because they don't have brains. Everything is an illusion. And so we're basically taking, here's how people talk, and putting it in here, and then they choose what they think the right response should be based on context. And we do that too, but then we have this secondary layer of emotion that they don't have. Because they get, like, so to get to that, like, I've been bullied, so if I was talking to that person, I could explain what my experience was and empathize with them and talk about how I dealt with it and could tell a story that would show empathy. AI's never been bullied. So, yeah. Yes, sir. Yep.
So earlier you had mentioned that the chat GPT and other similar programs would utilize web searches to get you the information along with an algorithm to make it seem more personal.
Yep.
The problem that I'm seeing is that which web searches it selects is most likely based on search engine optimization. And if that's true, we've got search engine optimizations companies here in town that are using ChatGPT to create those articles. So it looks like we are the dog chasing its tail.
Yes.
And
So-
essentially all the grim implications for that for the future. You say you don't know in 50 years what's going to happen. I'm just like, it looks like to me in 50 years we're not going to grow in knowledge if we're going to keep asking these programs what the answer is.
That is likely, that's my biggest concern, and not in the next 50 years, because I've been watching problems that technology has caused for the last 10 to 15 to 20 years with students who are less and less prepared when they come to college to engage in abstract thinking that is needed. I'm having fewer and fewer doctoral students coming to the program able and willing to engage in the types of abstract thinking that leads to new knowledge. They just want to be spoon-fed information. So it's not about knowledge now, it's about information. And having information is what matters, not construction of new knowledge. Now, you mentioned search engine optimization. So there is some research elsewhere where ChatGPT and the others are actually going to bypass those soon. Then they're going to go directly to sources and completely bypass Google and everything else. That's what they're building towards. And so they'll just go to direct sources. And in some instances, it did go to direct sources. It would go to HBR, it would go to different resources, but the resources often I would evaluate and determine I didn't think they were trustworthy. So if I was looking for up through 2050, there's one company I trust less than anyone else, and that is McKinsey. And it kept trying to go to McKinsey and tell me what they thought was going to happen in the next 50 years. But that's all marketing hype from McKinsey based on what they're telling their clients. So I had to go in and tell it, don't give me anything from McKinsey. But you can do that. You can go in and specify with a supervised version of AI what sources are going to be okay. But that relies on your ability to engage in higher order thinking, which because of these is unfortunately likely to continue to degrade. So, yes.
You were talking about how AI really, depending on the intent of the person using it, that will shift the way it behaves. Are there any safeguards that are being worked on to sort of prevent bigger or worse things like Chaos GPT from happening?
So most of the stuff is just on GitHub, which is just open. And most of the stuff that built ChatGPT was all just stuff people had posted on GitHub. And because there's no governmental, when you've got mostly 70 and 80-year-olds who are running your country, they don't think that this is a problem. The internet is a series of tubes. That kind of viewpoint of the world, they're not going to go, oh, here are potential problems. And further, the people who are talking to them are the AI companies who are going, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Everything's going to be fine. You don't need to worry about it at all. We don't need any regulation whatsoever. And by the way, here's $3 million for your campaign fund. And then they don't worry about it. So part of this is that as a political system, there's no impetus to put in guardrails. The only impetus to put in guardrails come from the companies themselves who might be concerned about being sued due to damage from the products that they create. That's kind of the only thing that's protecting us at all. But because a lot of this was developed open source, ChatGPT was originally done open source. And if you want to see somebody who's real mad about that, go look at Elon Musk. He put $100 million in with no guarantee he would have equity in it if it went from nonprofit to for-profit. He spent $100 million and got nothing. And they made billions when they sold it to Microsoft. So they put guardrails in there basically just to try not to hurt anybody so they don't get sued. So our legal frameworks are what are supposed to protect us, but then we also have technological frameworks that fit to the legal frameworks. So it's always a system of systems of systems of systems. And so whenever you think about all of this, it's never just one thing. It is multiple systems interacting. That's why when I talk about instructional systems and learning systems, I can also talk about operational systems that interface with those. I can talk about training systems that interface with learning systems and training systems. And they all rely on each other, and there's top-level parts, there's middle-level parts, there's bottom-level parts, and they all have to work together in meaningful ways. But if you're going to have policies, they all have to be fitted to one another in a way that actually makes them work. And do you know who's doing that right now? No one.
Because other things are already starting.
Yep.
So if you need to go, let's follow up. I have a feeling if you're interested and you want to hang around, that you would be happy to talk to you as long as he or you want to.
Yeah, I talk Monday night, and like, I'm ready to go again, so whatever you want.
Yeah, so let's think it one more time, and then if you need to leave, you want to